Micropipettes are pipettes that you use to measure small volumes of a solution. Micropipettes can be used to measure a volume as small as 0.2 microliters to a volume as large as 1000 microliters, which is 1 milliliters. So these are the 4 micropipettes that are generally available in a lab setting. We are going to go with the basics of all of these 4 micropipettes. The first one, as I mentioned in the lecture, is P2. The name of the pipette has a number which indicates the maximum volume it can be used to measure. So P2 has a range of 0.2 microliters to a volume as large as 2 microliters. So this is the plunger and this is the volume indicator window. For P2, the first digit on the window indicates the ones digit, and the second and the third digits indicate the first and the second digits after the decimal point. So the window here displays a volume of 150, which in the case of P2 indicates a volume of 1.50 microliters. In order to adjust the volume being displayed on the window, you use these volume adjustment threads. So you can see here, if I turn it anti-clockwise, you can reduce the volume being aspirated in this pipette, and if I turn it clockwise, you can increase the volume that can be aspirated. So 1.50 indicates a volume of 1.50 microliters, and these micro graduations can be used to measure the third digit after the decimal point. So the next step after you've set a specified volume is to choose the right set of tips that goes along with the pipette. So you have 3 sets of tips: the smallest one, the medium-sized tips, and the large set of tips. For P2, the tips that go along with this micropipette is the smallest set of tips. Once you've identified the set of tips that goes along with the micropipette, you just insert the micropipette into the tip box, apply slight pressure, and you've inserted the tip into the micropipette. As soon as you insert a tip, you close the box because you don't want to contaminate the fresh tips inside this tip box. And if you drop the tip by mistake on your working bench before you aspirate the liquid, please do not use this tip. Just dispose of the tip that you've dropped and take in a fresh tip. The next pipette that we have is P20. The smallest volume it can measure is 2 microliters, and the largest volume it can measure is 20 microliters. This is the volume indicator window, and for P20, the first digit is the tens digit, the second digit is the ones digit, and the final digit is the first digit after the decimal point. So 150 on a P20 would indicate a volume of 15.0 microliter, and just with the case of P2, you can use the volume adjustment threads to change the volume that you want and set a specific volume. And once that's done, you have to choose the appropriate set of tips. And for P20, the tip that you choose would be the medium-sized tips. So this is the set of tips that goes with P20. And once you've identified the set of tips that goes along with the micropipette of choice, you just insert the micropipette, apply slight pressure, and pull the micropipette out. The next pipette is P200. The smallest volume it can measure is 20 microliter, and the largest volume it can measure is 200 microliters. This is the volume indicator window. The first digit is the hundredths digit, the second being the tens digit, and the final digit is the ones digit. So 135 on a P200 would indicate a volume of 135. So this now indicates 135.2 because the arrow points to the first micrograduation beyond the digit 5. So if you want 135.0, you have to ensure that the arrow points to the exact graduation below 5. So once you've set a specified volume, you have to choose the right set of tips. Once again, for P200, it would be the medium-sized tip. I reiterate that for both P20 and P200, you choose the medium-sized tips. So this is the set of tips that goes along with P200. Once you've identified the tip box, just apply slight pressure to insert the tip into the micropipette. The final micropipette is P1000. So as you can see here, the smallest volume it can measure is 100 microliters and the largest volume it can measure is 1000 microliters. So this is the volume indicator window. As you can see here, it now displays the digits 070. The first digit is the thousandths digit, the second digit is the hundredths digit, and the final digit is the tenths digit. So 070 would indicate 700 microliters. The first digit can only be set to 1, and that's only being set to measure a volume of 1000 microliters, for which the window has to display 100. Remember that when you choose a micropipette and see the range, please do not set the indicator window here to any volume above or below the range that it can measure. The next step is to choose the appropriate set of tips, and for P1000 it's the largest set of tips available. So once you've identified the appropriate tips, insert the micropipette, apply slight pressure, and you've inserted the tip into the micropipette. So the task at hand right now is to measure a volume of 120 microliters. So as you can see here, P200 has a range of 20 to 200 microliters, and P1000 has a range of 100 to 1000 microliters. Technically, both these micropipettes can measure a volume of 120 microliters. But while identifying and choosing a micropipette for a specific volume, you should ensure that you choose a micropipette that has the maximum volume it can measure closest to the desired volume. So as you can see here, 120 microliters, which is your desired volume, is closer to 200 than it is to 1000 microliters. So you choose P200 to measure a volume of 120. So once you've identified the micropipette, you have to set the desired volume. So I'm turning the knobs anti-clockwise to reduce the volume, and I'm now setting it to a volume of 120 microliters. Once it is set, you have to choose the right set of tips. But before I do that, I'm going to show you how the plunger works. So this is the plunger for a micropipette. The state at which it is currently in is called the state of rest. Once you place the micropipette into your palm, you use your thumb to manipulate the plunger. So you apply slight pressure on the plunger, and when you apply pressure, you can see that you can push the plunger in, and by doing so, you will notice that you encounter a first set of resistance. This state of the plunger is called the first stop. You cannot move the plunger further down without changing the amount of pressure. So you have to increase the pressure in order to push it down further. And when you do so, you will notice that you can push it along further a little bit, and you will encounter a second set of resistance. That's called the second stop. So this is the state of rest. You apply pressure first stop, apply a bit more pressure second stop. This is how a plunger works. So you've set the desired volume, you've chosen the right pipette. You know that for P200, you choose the medium sized tips. So once you've identified the tips, insert a tip onto the micropipette, close the tip box, and the task at hand right now is to aspirate 120 microliters of this liquid from this tube into this tube. So you open the tube, go to the state of first stop using the plunger, and then immerse the pipette into the liquid. Ensure it's not too deep and it's only 2 to 3 millimeters below the surface of the liquid. Once you've done so, gradually release the plunger, which will allow you to aspirate the liquid back into the pipette. Close this tube, go to your destination tube, open it. You have to use your plunger and go to the first stop to dispense the liquid, but you will still have residual liquid present in your tip. So go all the way to the second stop to completely dispense the liquid off. Pull the pipette out and then release the plunger. Once you've done dispensing the liquid into the destination tube, you have to release the disposable tip. This can be done using the ejector button. So this is the ejector button, and this is the shaft attached to this button. So when I press this button, the shaft is going to be pushed down, which will eject the tip off into the dispenser. So To recall, P2 is the smallest pipette that has a range of 0.2 to 2 microliters, and the smallest set of tips goes with this pipette. And the next micropipette is P20 that has a range of 2 to 20 microliters, and the medium sized tips goes with this micropipette. P200 has a range of 20 to 200 microliters, and once again the medium size tips goes with this micropipette. And finally P1000 that has a range of 100 to 1000 microliters, and the largest set of tips goes with this micropipette. So once you choose the right pipette, set the desired volume on the indicator window and then attach a disposable tip. Depress the plunger to the first stop and then immerse it into the sample, and then release the plunger back to its resting state in a very slow and gradual manner. Then move the pipette into a desired tube and then push the plunger to the first stop and then to the second stop. Take the pipette out of the tube and then release the plunger. Do not release the plunger until you are out of the liquid. Finally, discard the tip using the ejector button. Here are a few tips while pipetting a liquid. Do not scroll the volume adjustment knobs in a pipette to a volume higher or lower than the pipette's range. And always hold the pipette in a vertical angle when you aspirate and dispense a liquid. Do not immerse the tip into the sample more than 2 to 3 millimeters below the surface of the liquid that you want to aspirate. And once you have dispensed the liquid into the desired tube, do not release the plunger before you take it out of the tube. If you release it back to its resting state while still in the tube and into the liquid, you risk aspirating the sample back into the tip and you end up losing your sample. And finally, while pipetting 2 or more liquids into the same tube, always pipette the larger volumes first, because it's easier to pipette smaller volumes into a tube that has larger volumes.